We need our public policies to be based on science and evidence, and not on I think so, or I wish, or my political agenda leads somewhere else. Uh, to do public policy, we need to know what we're talking about. We need to have the science and the knowledge behind the public policy. Then we can choose different paths. Science does not tell you how you should do policy. What science tells you is what are the conditions for the policy that you want to do. This is what science tells us. And then a government from one political inclination will take away from that science. Then we're going to address this issue using X number of tools. And another government from another inclination use different tools. But the basis of the decision on science, on public policies, has to be science. Now, there's another issue connected to this one that impacts particularly in democracies, not so much in authoritarian countries. Science, for instance, in climate change and in changes in the oceans and the Atlantic, etc., is telling us that we should be acting very decisively and very quickly. We wasted enough time debating if climate change was a scientific fact or not, and the changes kept on going. So science is telling us we need to act now, and we need to act in a very decisive way. The question then arises is what in certain scientific circles we call the debate between the end of the month and the end of the world. Science is telling us we need to do a lot and right now. But can our societies withstand tremendous changes in a very short period that will be very costly? So we need to understand what science is telling us, but we need also to understand what our societies, our democratic societies, can endure in the changes that we need to do. Of course, if we don't want to go that way, if you say, no, the changes are too dramatic for the societies, to our social contract to withstand, science will just say, well, I warned you, things will keep on going, not doing anything is not a choice, and at some point the science will look at the human family and say, oh, poor them, they had such a potential, and there you go, another dinosaur group. In comes the next species that will prevail on the planet. So we need to take that in consideration. But what science is telling us now is that we don't have that much time. And we need to do dramatic changes in a way that we organize society. So we need to have this conversation with our citizens. We need to be clear and we need to be honest. We need to explain the science. We need to explain the consequences of not doing anything. And we need to have public policies to help those who need help in this transition. It's a very serious and difficult times that we are facing. And not doing anything is not an option. Doing dramatic things without having a proper conversation with our citizens is not an option either. Unfortunately, I don't see in most countries and democracies governments having this conversation with the people. When we were hit by the pandemic, I had this, if you like, this naive moment where I thought, well, this is our Hollywood moment, where a common enemy will bring the human family together and we will fight this together because it's nobody's fault and it impacts everybody. So here we go, Hollywood, welcome. For me, nothing that happened. What happened was countries became even more selfish and closed. Climate change is the same, with some differences. Obviously, the impact of climate change events is much stronger in developing countries than in developed countries, not because the developing countries are more polluting than the developed countries. Actually, it's the other way around. The whole continent of Africa is responsible for only 4% of climate change emissions, but because the infrastructures and the institutions are weaker. But we are all in the same boat. There's a Scottish poet called Damien Barr. He said, apparently in every language, that the idea of we are all in the same boat exists, variations on the theme. And Damien Barr says that that's not true. We are not all in the same boat. We are all in the same storm. But some of us are in a really nice super yacht, and others are just floating in the waves trying to survive. If we are going to gather this storm, we're going to have to work together. And working together means, among other things, that the countries on the Atlantic Basin will have to understand the different starting points of the discussion. We need to understand that countries in Africa, for instance, need to generate the wealth and the social development that allow the average age in Africa is 19 years old. And so there's lots of young people there. We need to generate the wealth and the social development that allows all these young people to have the quality of life that our young people have. But we cannot do it the way that we did it in Europe and North America, because the planet will not survive another 150 years of industrial revolution. So we need to take another route, but we need to keep the eye on the ball, and the ball is these young people deserve, as much as we do, a quality of life. Actually, the consequences of not doing this are dramatic for everybody. I can only imagine, but it's not hard to imagine, that all these youngsters in Africa, if nothing happens and if we don't have the capacity to generate the wealth for the quality of life that they deserve, will look north and will say, oh, look at Europe, old, rich, and fat. Let's all go there because life is better there. So even for our own interests, we need to take a combined and a structural approach to the consequences of climate change. If we don't want for our way of life to change dramatically because of climate change, we need to address climate change everywhere. It's not just Europe. Climate change doesn't stop on the borders of Europe and say, oh no, these people are behaving, so I'll go around and go elsewhere. No, it will touch us, all of us. And will touch all of us, but it will touch in different ways. Some of us are on the super yacht and others are on the waves. We need to look at the people in the waves more than we need to look at the people in the super yacht, because people in super yacht have the capacity and the tools to deal with it. And the Atlantic Center can have a really important role in bringing all the countries of the Atlantic Basin into a discussion on how can we all work on a way that we all survive the storm.